What's really going on behind the door of BTS's rehearsal room? Why is it that after a dance rehearsal with Taehyung, Jungkook suddenly says something that makes ARMY speechless? Many thought it was just a regular training session, but it turns out there's a big reason it's been kept tight. That it all started with a simple, unplanned moment. Jungkook and Taehyung are seen training together again, preparing the moves with full focus as before. However, the atmosphere in the rehearsal room that night felt different. There is something that cannot be described simply by the word routine. ARMY began to realize that Jungkook's expression was not just serious because of the choreography. His gaze looked deeper, as if there was a burden he was withstanding. Taehyung also seemed calmer, but there was a warmth that made the training atmosphere feel emotional. Then, after the session was over, Jungkook finally spoke in a quiet but honest voice. He reveals the real reason why training with Taehyung always feels different to him. Jungkook says that every time he stands next to Taehyung during rehearsals, it's like he's reliving their early days. A time when everything was not as big as it is now. A time when they only had one dream and strengthened each other secretly. "I sometimes forget how far we've come," Jungkook said, causing a sudden silence. It was a simple sentence, but it had such an impact that it struck the heart of anyone who heard it. He later admitted that lately, he often feels pressured by expectations, schedules, and fear of disappointing fans. However, when training with Taehyung, he feels like he's back to being himself. Not the superstar Jungkook, but the former Jungkook, a young boy who just wants to dance with his best friend. Taehyung, who heard the confession, did not immediately answer long. He just smiled a little, then patted Jungkook on the shoulder, as if to say that he understood everything without the need for words. And that's where the ARMY really fell silent, because the moment is not about dance. It's not about a comeback. It's not about the big stage. It was about a friendship that persisted even as the world changed. Fans immediately flooded social media with emotional reactions. Many said they didn't think Jungkook would be that honest. There are also those who feel like they grew up with them, watching two people who have gone through so much remain each other's home. But the most surprising thing, Jungkook closed with a sentence that made ARMY's heart collapse slowly. "I'm grateful. Taehyung is still by my side. Because without it, I might have lost my way." For a while, the training room was no longer just a place to practice. It bears witness that behind the spotlight and glitter of BTS's world, there are still struggling humans, there are still sincere friendships, and there is still honesty that is finally revealed. And since that confession came out, many ARMY members have begun to wonder, has Jungkook been harboring more things than he's shown on camera? Because for a Jungkook who is known to be always strong, always full of energy, always performing perfectly on stage, such a sentence is not something that just comes out. It sounded like an inner voice that finally couldn't hide anymore. Some people who were around the practice even called the atmosphere after it drastically changed. Jungkook had been silent for quite a while, looking down while catching his breath, as if he had just opened something very personal. Taehyung didn't leave either. It remains there, sitting not far away, waiting without forcing, without asking, and it was precisely Taehyung's reticence that made the moment even more piercing. Because ARMY knows, Taehyung isn't the type to talk a lot when someone is fragile. He is the present type. And that night, his presence became the answer. Not long after, Jungkook resumed with a more subdued voice. He admits that the training this time is not just about movement. He's trying to reinvent himself. "I'm afraid one day I'll forget why I started all this," she said. That sentence left the ARMY at a loss for words. How could someone who is already on top of the world still feel afraid of losing their way? But maybe that's the reality. Behind the scenes, Idol is human. And Jungkook finally showed that side. More surprisingly, Jungkook also said that Taehyung is one of the reasons he has survived so far. He mentioned that when things get tough, when schedules get tiring, when pressure comes from all directions, Taehyung always has a simple way to remind her that she's not alone. And just then, Taehyung finally answered, briefly but meaningfully, "We've come this far together. So don't think you have to bear it yourself." One sentence, but enough to make the atmosphere of the rehearsal room turn into something much more emotional than just dance practice. ARMY, who heard the story, immediately flooded the comments with virtual tears. Many wrote that they did not expect Jungkook and Taehyung's relationship to be that deep. Many also felt this moment was like a reminder that BTS is not just a big group, but a family that saves each other in an invisible way. And after that moment, the story about Jungkook and Taehyung's training didn't just stop. Instead, more and more of the ARMY feels there is something bigger going on behind the scenes, something that is yet to be fully revealed. Due to the past few days, Jungkook is seen more often pensive in some footage. The smile remained, but there was a different impression. It was as if there was a feeling that he was harboring, something that he only realized after the meeting. Taehyung is too. Many said Taehyung's gaze when he saw Jungkook that night was not an ordinary gaze. It's not just group mates. It was the gaze of someone who understood the wound without needing to be explained. Because it turns out, behind the big stage and the spotlight of the world, Jungkook still needs someone who can say simply, "You don't have to be perfect." And that night, that person was Taehyung. Some of the ARMY even said this moment reminded them of the early days of BTS, when Jungkook was still the magne who always followed Hyung with eyes full of admiration. Taehyung is the one who most often secretly guards Jungkook since long ago, and now, many years later, it still does the same thing, as if time had not changed the essence of their relationship. What made it all the more emotional was that when Jungkook finally smiled, his eyes glazed slightly, then said, "I forgot how it felt to be heard like this." The sentence was like a fine knife in ARMY's heart, because that means Jungkook's been holding things back for too long on his own, and probably, the training was not only about dancing, it was a night where Jungkook finally felt safe to be honest. ARMY began to realize something important. Sometimes the biggest moments don't happen on stage, but in a small rehearsal room, when two best friends reinforce each other without a camera, without a spotlight, without the need for explanation. And until now, one question still hangs in the minds of many. If Jungkook is this honest now, because one thing is certain, the brief encounter with Taehyung that night wasn't just a rehearsal, it was an emotional point that would probably change everything.